In the early 2000s, there was a video game franchise called Brothers in Arms. It was a World War II tactical shooter series that was developed by Gearbox and published by Ubisoft. The storyline of the games focused on the American paratroopers who fought during two of the biggest operations during World War II. The D-Day invasion in France and Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands. There were a total of 10 games made in this franchise, but the three main games were Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30, Brothers in Arms Earned in Blood, and Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway. Those are the three games I want to talk about today. The storyline is a long connected narrative between the three games, and most of the characters are fictional, but the locations and battles were real. The tactical gameplay is based off of real tactics used in the war, and that tactical aspect is what makes this series stand out above early Call of Duty World War II games and even Medal of Honor, which is another beloved franchise of mine. I think the real reason why people got tired of the World War II genre was due to the fact that all the games were the same. They were basic. It was just run around through famous battles and watch a few cinematic cutscenes. They all were just your typical run-of-the-mill run-and-gun shooters. Brothers in Arms featured tactical gameplay, more realistic combat, an emotional narrative, and memorable characters. I'm actually surprised that there are not more shooters like this today. Whether it's based in World War II or not, the tactical element of commanding squads of troops while you complete objectives adds much more interest to gamers who are fans of the shooter genre. This series is also proof that single-player tactical shooter games can work. So in this video, I'm going to look back at the Brothers in Arms series and explain why this is one of the best World War II franchises ever created. Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 was released back in March of 2005. The narrative is focused on Sergeant Matt Baker. The game has you assume the role of Baker, who is the squad leader of paratroopers in the 101st Airborne Division. The game starts the night of D-Day on June 6, 1944. The game begins with a hectic start as Baker is knocked out of the airplane as it is struck by anti-aircraft fire. Baker is separated from his squad, so you have to spend the early morning regrouping and sneaking around with other squad members and taking out anti-air guns. This is a pretty accurate story of what the paratroopers did during the invasion of Normandy. Other missions in the game include you taking over towns, defending them against German counterattacks. It was important to secure these towns in order to establish a perimeter as the beaches were being secured. The missions themselves are pretty standard, but it's the tactical gameplay and narrative that makes the game worth playing, even if most missions are attack and defend towns and hedgerows. The story gives off Band of Brothers vibes. If you were a fan of that show, then you would really appreciate this game series. You see squad mates who are friends, talking and joking around. There's more intense times where there's arguing that can't be seen and heard between guys. Then there's the emotional moments when some of the guys die, and those that survive become haunted by everything they've seen and done. There may not be a ton of gore in this game, but the developers did capture the horrors of war and what it was like to lose friends during battle. It was both fun and heartbreaking to go through these battles with this group of soldiers. The series is known for its intuitive command system. The player can command teams of soldiers and even tanks. Teams and tanks can be ordered to move, lay suppressive fire, regroup, find cover, and even charge at the enemy. Using the command system and playing with strategy is not recommended, it's required. The game stresses on multiple occasions the effectiveness of fire and maneuver tactics. The game series is not only based on real events, but the combat and tactics are based on actual procedures used in the war by these soldiers. This was known as the 4 Fs. That stands for Find, Fix, Flank, and Finish. It is the step-by-step process of suppressing and flanking the enemy. There really is an emphasis on team command over marksmanship in this game. This isn't hell let loose where one bullet's gonna kill you or an enemy. The game was developed with realistic accuracy in mind. The guns in the game feature erratic accuracy, and enemy fire can interfere with the player's aim to simulate the effects of suppressive fire on you. The lack of accuracy in the game is to help simulate the difficulty of hitting targets in an actual combat situation. That ultimately forces you to command your squads to help you out. You can't be Rambo in this game, and it's actually cool to not be the Hollywood action star like in so many other games. So typically you are given command of 1 or 2 1 to 3 man teams. There's 2 types of teams, fire teams and assault teams. Fire teams are made up of soldiers with M1 Garands and bars, the Browning automatic rifle, and they specialize in suppressing the enemy. The assault team is made up of soldiers who carry M1A1 carbines and the Thompson submachine gun. They are good at attacking enemy positions. It's a good idea to use them to flank an enemy position while the fire team suppresses them. Some missions even allow you to command a tank, and those missions are a lot of fun. The tank can obviously blow things up, but you could also stand on top of the tank and use the mounted machine gun and suppress enemies yourself. Road to Hill 30 was a solid game, and it was quite long too. There's 20 missions that provide you with a great story and fun gameplay that differs from many other World War II shooters. And it didn't take long to get the sequel. Earned in Blood came out later that same year in October. In the sequel, you play as Sergeant Joe Red Hartsock, who was originally a corporal in Matt Baker's fire team. The game featured new weapons, vehicles, multiplayer content, and a new skirmish mode. Two of the biggest improvements in this game was the AI improvement, and level design allowed for more open-ended possibilities to move around and strategize during battles. Like its predecessor, the game wants you to use the 4 Fs while playing and avoid the classic run-and-gun gameplay of many other games. Yet again, you struggle with accuracy and you lose quite a bit of health when you get hit by enemy gunfire. The enemies did get tougher in this game. The Germans will constantly reposition themselves and they will react to whatever you and your squads do. You will have to consider using stealth and trying to figure out a way to distract your enemies while you flank them, because tackling the enemy head-on is difficult. The enemy AI is smarter and more aggressive in this game. The sequel not only features unique gameplay, but also a unique spin on the narrative. The story is basically a reflection on the events that took place on June 6th and the days that followed. An Army historian is interviewing paratroopers about their experiences during these battles. The story is divided up into 3 parts. The first part is a recollection of Joe Hartsock's time in Sergeant Baker's squad during the start of the invasion. The second part focuses on Hartsock taking command of 2nd Squad, 3rd Platoon during the battle for and the defense for the town of Carentan. The third part of the campaign takes place in a few other French towns that I can't pronounce, but the fighting is intense. The game features a total of 17 missions, and it was cool to see the narrative tell the story for the same battles but in different perspectives, and every mission was new. The missions were unique, so it was fresh, and again, telling the story through multiple perspectives in Baker and Hartsock was a unique way to narrate this story in a World War II game. Again, another way of how this series stood out from the other games in the genre. This sequel is pretty impressive, especially given the fact that it literally came out months after the first game. Improved AI, refreshing storytelling, an impressive cinematic style presentation, and great voice acting makes this sequel worthy. And also, the soundtrack in all these games is pretty good. I should mention that as well. The third main title arrived in 2008. Hell's Highway was a huge improvement in regards to graphics and gameplay. The third installment also took us to another major invasion, Operation Market Garden, which took place in the Netherlands in September of 1944. The game follows our same heroes from the first 2 games, those that survived D-Day, and you once again assume the role of Matt Baker. As you progress through the story, you command up to 3 squads, and you have the typical assault teams and fire teams. You also have the opportunity to command a bazooka crew or an MG crew on a few occasions. The game features a brand new cover system where you could duck behind a wall and your view turns into third person. You can aim and fire over the shoulder while behind cover, and first person view and iron sight aiming returns when you move from that cover and you're walking around again like normal. I personally enjoyed both viewpoints. It was a nice addition to the gameplay, and it blended in well with commanding troops as you could look out across the battlefield and point to where you want your men to go. There's also destructible cover in the game, so you have to be careful when you're hiding behind sandbags and wooden fences. The game also added regenerative health, which in my opinion was a welcomed addition, and the game also featured an action camera. It was a feature that would temporarily slow down time and zoom in on the enemies that you killed. This would typically be triggered by a headshot or a grenade explosion. The story is focused on Matt Baker once again, and like the first 2 games, the story is based on real events with mostly fictional characters. Baker jumps into Operation Market Garden after being promoted to Staff Sergeant. Baker is constantly haunted by the events and deaths from D-Day. Joe Hartsock returns and commands the 2nd Squad of Baker's unit. There is a lot of squad drama in this game. Baker basically has PTSD, Sam Corian is upset that he keeps getting passed over for a promotion, there's a new and young replacement named Frankie that frustrates everybody because he's just that typical newbie, he's cocky, he starts falling for a Dutch civilian girl in the game too that ends up getting him killed, and the whole operation is a mess and nothing seems to go right, just like it really did in the real war. The guys are sent to capture the Sun Bridge, which gets destroyed by the Germans. The men befriend the Dutch resistance and other civilians who live in the local town, But sadly, the Germans bombed that town and many of those civilians are killed. The game continues with the US and British struggling to secure their objectives. Some squad mates are killed and others are wounded. Things really do look pretty grim in this game. Baker and Hartsock are wounded by mortar fire later in the game. Baker suffers a facial wound while Hartsock is gravely wounded. The most memorable moment comes near the end of the game when you fight at Hell's Highway. It's a brutal battle. Everything is on fire, and the whole area is surrounded by red colors, smoke. It really looks like you're fighting in hell. And it is the final nail in the coffin for this failed invasion. The ending is par for the course in this one. Baker learns that Hartsock is paralyzed, and he breaks the news to him. Very emotional scene at the end. And then there's a hint to a fourth game that would take place during the Battle of the Bulge. Sadly, we would never get this game. The fourth installment of the series was revealed at E3 in 2011. The game was called Brothers in Arms Furious 4. The game was drastically different from the first three. The fourth game would not include Baker and the men fighting in the Battle of the Bulge. Hell, the game even dropped the whole realistic portrayal. This game was to feature a squad of 4 heroes, essentially, that would cause chaos while kicking Nazi ass. The reveal received poor reception, so changes were reportedly made, but ultimately the project was cancelled. Over the years, there was some mobile games that came out, along with some PSP and Wii games as well. Back in September of 2021, Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford said the company was working on a new game, and that they would not show anything until the game was closer to completion. Well, here we are in 2024 now, and we have not heard anything. I really do want at least one more Brothers in Arms game so we can finish up the story with these main characters. This series really was awesome. Great story, great characters, great gameplay, great soundtrack. It was just an all-around good experience to play through. It's also nice to learn about actual events that took place during these battles. This series is a perfect example of why first-person shooters can still work today, even in the World War II era. Especially tactical first-person shooters. The gameplay formula was perfect. The realistic first-person elements combined with the strategy of commanding troops is awesome. Why this type of gameplay hasn't been recreated in other shooters is beyond me. You don't really see a lot of games like this. This truly is one of the best game series out there across the board for not only World War II shooters, but shooters in general. Well, thanks for watching the video. Let me know your thoughts on the franchise, and if you'd like to see another game, then go check out the other content on my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. Consider subscribing, please. You can also find my content on podcasting platforms. Just Google Analyze This Podcast. You can also find me on X and TikTok, X at AnalyzeThis_YT, and TikTok at AnalyzeThis54_YT. Thanks again, and take care.